Hi, Danville. Alan Shields here, Chief of Police with the town, and thefts, 2 pursuits, and too many accidents. And we'll cover all that during the show. But we are 10-8 and in service to all of you, which means we're here to make people's lives better by safeguarding the lives, rights, and property of everyone we serve. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that during this whole show, and I'll monitor it for a little bit afterwards. If I can answer any of your questions during the show, I'd be happy to answer them live during the show. And if I can't, what I'll do is I'll get back to them during the chat. We've got some good information tonight. Hi, Sue. It's good seeing you in the supermarket the other day. Hey, say hello to Andy for me. But I do want to cover, we have another live engagement event. It's going to be taking place next week. And we do have our Coffee with the Cops. Starbucks Coffee, 398 Hartz Avenue. We'll be there on April 13th between 9 and 10 a.m. And I do want to remind people, I did say last week that it was going to be the one on Railroad. This is the one on Hartz. So this is Hartz and Prospect right in the middle of downtown. And we'll be there from 9 to 10. All right. Let's move on to the crime blotter. Let's look at that because there's a little bit to get into there, and I want to make sure that we take enough time to cover that. So crime, communitycrimemap.com. You can go there for all of the calls for service, the crime. You can actually get alerts. So you can zoom into your neighborhood, and you can have the system send you alerts as information is uploaded. March 29, April 3rd. We had, and I'm going to use 2 slides on this one, unlike normally I just throw them all on one. Part 1 crimes, we did have 4 total thefts. On the 29th, we actually had a food delivery driver. So this guy actually goes up to the door. He takes the package. So there was already a package on the door waiting for the owner. So he goes up to the door. He takes the package and he removes it from the steps so it's out of view from the front door. He delivers the food, and as he's leaving, he takes the package with him. So we're working with the food delivery service company to identify that person and follow up on that. On March 30th, we had property that was stolen from a vehicle overnight on the 400 block of Lagonda Way. On April 2nd, we had a theft of a bicycle from the shop, and on April 3rd, we had merchandise stolen from the Costco Business Center. On the theft of the bicycle, this was someone that actually went into one of our downtown bicycle stores. As he was in there, they presented fake documents, so fake ID and credit card, took the bike, and then fled with the bike. And you know, we're working to identify that person. The reason I wanted to highlight that one, 2 reasons. One, if you're doing some sort of a transaction, make sure you know who the person is that you're transacting with. And if you are a resident and you're trading property, like say you go onto a site and you agree to sell something for money, we have a safe trade zone up here. And what we do is we have a camera that's affixed to those 2 spots. And what you'll see is as you enter our parking lot, on the exit, there are 2 spots, and there's painting on the ground that says safe trade zone. There's a sign that says safe trade zone. So if you're parked in those spots, we actually have a camera that's pointing that direction. So if you do a transaction, we at least have some description of the vehicle, maybe of the people that are there, and that way we can do some follow-up from there and see who did what. But it's really important that if you're doing a transaction that you know who you're dealing with, that you use secure payment methods, and that you don't release your property without receiving good payment. On the other side is make sure that when you are doing that transaction, avoid doing it at home. You don't necessarily have to use our safe trade zone, but make sure you do it in an area that is going to be safe for you and whoever you are bringing with you to do the transaction. I'll be honest, our safe trade zone is actually used quite a bit. It gets used for merchandise transactions. It also gets used for the unfortunate side of things. It gets used for child swaps when people are swapping custody of kids, those sort of things. It's just a good neutral place to do it, and it is recorded so we can make sure that that's all taken care of. All right, let's look at accidents, because I was giving out kudos to all of you for driving so well and doing this, and maybe I didn't knock on enough wood because we didn't do so well last week, not at all. So let's look at that. Looks like we're frozen again. Let me see if I can get this unfrozen real quick. All right. So I am working on that. Let me see if I can get this back up. and it's not going to work for me. All right, so we'll just stay right here. So between March 29th and the 3rd, we had 4 property accidents, we had 2 injury collisions, and we had 1 hit and run. The hit and run was a little fender bender in a parking lot. The injury collision's kind of concerning. One was on Sycamore and Camino Ramon early morning. I think someone actually mentioned it last week on the show, and that was running a red light, car accident. And so what we ask people to do, and I'm not saying that that's the case, we haven't reviewed the report yet, but please be careful and make sure you're paying attention out there. Drive safe, drive slow. And then the one on the other injury collision was actually an auto versus a bicycle, where the bicycle was going the wrong way on the road. And again, if on the bicycle side of things, then there was a motor officer here a while back that used to always say this. He would say, if you wouldn't do it in a car, don't do it on a bike. So in other words, don't drive the wrong way on the road, don't cross the double yellow line, don't drive or ride your bike in an unsafe manner, don't run stop signs, stoplights, that sort of thing. Follow the same rules of the road as you would for a car. One of the intersections I know we get quite a bit is the Iron Horse Trail at San Ramon Valley Boulevard, which is a wicked intersection because there's a lot of traffic that goes through there. There's a lot of things visually going on there. And I know Andy Dillard, our partner, he's put striping around the lights, and there's all these blinky lights and flashy things, and yet we still see people running the stoplight there. I don't want to say all the time, but it happens more frequently than it should, and that's an accident waiting to happen. All right, I'm going to see if I can reconnect this so I can get some of this PowerPoint back up. All right. And for those that have not checked it out yet, what I would do is encourage you to go to our annual report site. There's going to be a link in the description. I'm going to cover our last section tonight, and then we'll move on to a new topic next week. Next week, we plan on talking about fentanyl and the one pill can kill, and we're going to go over some statistics in there that aren't intended to scare people, but intended to inform you to the point where you will all make better decisions. So let's look at what happened this week on the pursuit front. So let's talk about those 2 pursuits. On March 29th, it was not a pursuit. We had a stolen vehicle recovery, and the man was arrested and booked in jail. That was the picture to the left. We actually ended up closing Diablo Road for a moment there. On March 30th, we had a stolen vehicle that led officers onto a pursuit into Concord. Ultimately, the man crashed the car. He was arrested and booked in jail. And then on the 2nd, we had a pursuit suspect from a commercial burglary. But let me go over these in a little bit more detail. So the one on the 29th, that was from our automated license plate camera system. Car comes into town, comes back that it's stolen. We get a lot of cops in the area. Our officer turns on the lights, car pulls over, we order the person out. Where it happened, though, was Diablo Road, just east of the freeway and east of the shopping center. It's near Alamados and Villa Hermosa, that area. So you can imagine that's a narrow roadway. And what our officer ended up doing was just closing the road and making sure that it was safe, pulled the person out, handcuffed him, cleared the road back open, and then took the person to jail. That's how we want things to go. We hope that if we can flood an area and we can show an overwhelming level of force, that we won't have to use any force and everything will be resolved without any kind of an incident. And that is our ideal. If we have a stolen car that comes into town, we simply want to recover the car. That is the goal. On the 30th, though, that's where we had the stolen car where it led officers onto a pursuit. And how that one happened was our officers went and approached the car. It was on Sycamore and I-680. They noticed a vehicle code violation. It actually ran a stoplight. As the officers tried to stop him, pursuit was initiated, and it went 680, 242 onto 4 into Concord. Ultimately, the car ended up crashing, and we took the person into custody and booked him into jail. Much would have preferred it to be just like the one the day prior where the person pulls over and stops. On April 2nd, that pursuit is pretty interesting. So if you remember, last week we talked about one of our gas stations getting hit, and they had taken some merchandise from the store. The gas station had pretty good cameras. We were then able to use those cameras and check our cameras and get a license plate. Our detectives and officers put that license plate into our system. So on April 2nd, in the evening hours, our officers got an alert on their phones and their computers that said, hey, this person's coming back into town. They were able to locate him on the south end of town, actually in the city of San Ramon, just over the border on San Ramon Valley Boulevard. And immediately the car took off and the vehicle fled 680 south, went on to 580 in Dublin, and ultimately it was driving in such a way that caused the officers to terminate that pursuit. The reason I bring those up is it will dovetail right into our final thought, and I'll cover that after I cover the annual report, but I wanted to cover those in detail because I want you to think about pursuits and the fact that we do attempt to apprehend people that do crimes in town, but there is a test and there is some criteria that we follow, and we do have a pretty robust policy on that, and we'll cover that in our final thought. All right, I'm going to check the chat here. It looks like there was one question that came in. Gary says he used the safe trade zone. That was great. It is good, I think, too, when you're transacting and you actually tell someone like, hey, there's this zone, it's in front of the police department, there's cameras, and I don't think someone wishing to steal from you or do harm would choose necessarily that location to do it. So it provides a good, safe place for everybody. Okay, so Laurel says, what was all the commotion earlier today in front of CVS? Laurel, I have to admit, I don't actually know what that was. So what I'll do is when we're done with the show here, I'll go over to our supervisor and I'll see what it is and I'll answer in the chat. Larry Henderson asked, Chief, is there any update on last week's bar fight? There is not an update on the bar fight. We are in contact with the victim in that. Both the officer, the detective, I've actually spoken with not the victim, but the victim's family. And we're working to continue or complete that investigation and present it to the district attorney's office. Now, let me speak generally. Generally, when there is a crime, and let's say you've been the victim of that crime, an officer is going to come out and they're going to do an investigation. And so they're going to try to talk to you as the victim. They're going to try to see if there's any witnesses. They're going to try to collect any evidence that they may have. So video, DNA, fingerprints, anything that would go to either proving that the crime occurred and that someone was in some way connected to it or not connected to it, right? We have an obligation and a duty to make sure that we identify those that did it and free those from suspicion as well. So we're simply working to find the facts. As we're doing that, though, there's a very important question that sometimes gets overlooked with our victims, and we're going to ask you if you desire prosecution. And we even ask those if your car was broken into and we don't even know who it is. We're going to note on the report whether or not you want prosecution. Here's the reason. A lot of times there may be disputes and there may be a fight between two people. And when it's all said and done, they realize, hey, you know what? Things got out of hand. We know each other maybe we don't. We're friends, however that situation is. But it's done here. I don't want to prosecute you. You don't want to prosecute me. And that does happen. And then there's other times where it's like, absolutely not. I'm a victim of a crime. You need to be held account for what you did, and I want you to be prosecuted. All we do as the police officers is we have a very defined role. We are the fact finders in that. And so what we do is we try to determine the facts, your desire as the victim, and then we pass that on to the DA's office. That way, when the DA reviews the case and they're reading the facts of the case, they're reviewing relevant evidence, they can also look and say, okay, is this a victim of the crime that actually wants something done? Do they want prosecution or not? And frankly, if you don't, and it's a low-level crime, not a domestic violence crime, we probably wouldn't even send it to the DA's office. But if you want prosecution and there's cause, then we'd send it to the DA's office for review. The one caveat is going to be domestic violence. If it is a case of domestic violence, whether the victim wants prosecution or not, we send it to the DA's office for review because we realize those are special and unique cases. So Larry, good question. I appreciate it. Debbie, I have to say this 10-8 is very informative. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate it. And keep joining us because in the coming weeks, next week I said we're going to talk about fentanyl. That's going to be the featured topic. And then we're going to roll right into our emergency preparedness. And we're going to have several weeks on that. So tune in for that. There's a lot of good stuff there. And I think we're going to try to wrangle up some guests and see if we can bring in some folks for those shows as well. So, all right, so let's talk about our annual report. So, Debbie, if you want information, there is a link in the description to the Chiefs page, and you can see not all, I think I put 5 years worth of our annual reports in there. And then you can also get our updates. So when I go to the council, I usually provide them an annual report or an update, and it's in booklet form, but you can get a digital copy right on the screen here. And so let's talk about it. We're finishing up our series on our annual report. And let's talk about our volunteers and police service. So you can see that is at our appreciation dinner in the upper left. That is them at National Night Out in the upper right. And they are the ones in uniform. They're the ones that wear the white shirt, the blue pants, and the patch. And then you can see Bert and Kathy down in the lower left at one of our fundraising events. So our volunteer and police services, those are people from the community that volunteer their time, typically somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 9,000 hours a year as a group. They volunteer in service to the town of Danville. You'll see them out doing patrols in the neighborhood. You'll see them out doing security checks. You'll see them out doing vacation house checks for you. And one of our newest volunteers, Jason Lukash, and I think this may be the first time we've actually ever had a father-son duo here, but we've got Ken Lukash and his son Jason Lukash, and they're a team. And Jason is lifting a program off the ground for the very first time called Cops in the Community, where we will, if you like, we will bring cops into your neighborhood. And this is more of an outreach. Clearly there's cops always in your neighborhood, but this is meant for if you have maybe a child that's got a birthday party, or actually a few weeks ago we did a World War II vet's 103rd birthday. Great celebration put on by one of our commissioners, and we just had some volunteers, and we had some officers that were free at the time, so that was great. They headed over there too, and it's just a way to say thank you and show our appreciation for the community that we serve. But it's also a way for us to build a connection, and we realize that we serve absolutely everyone in this community, and it is very important that we are reaching out and here for those in our community. So that is our volunteers. There are many programs that we would not be able to do. We run a very lean program. We're very efficient at delivering police services, and I believe that we're as efficient as we are because we've got these volunteers, and they do an excellent job. Well, now I'm going to talk about a different kind of volunteer. So those are our volunteers and police services. You'll often hear them referred to as VIPs. Now let's talk about our reserve officers. So these are going to be officers, and you'll see them in the pictures. They look just like me. They have the same peace officer powers while they're working, but they do the job absolutely for free. So our VIPs, our reserve officers, are fully sworn police officers that do this job for free. And this year we actually said goodbye to 2 of them. We said goodbye to Officer Walt Welty. He's in the upper left there with his partner Ted Fick. And then we also said goodbye to Officer Mark Silvera, and he's in the bottom 2 photos. Combined, think about this, combined, those 2 reserve officers donated 75 years of service on a part-time basis, on a volunteer basis, but they were active for over 75 years when you combine both of their times. They contributed on patrol, so they would be out driving a patrol car, answering calls. When we'd have power lines go down or major accidents, they would respond out and help us secure the scene. You can see let me show this picture again. There's kind of a joke picture in there of Officer Silvera at one of our National Night Out events, kind of goofing with the 2 kids there on the quad and writing them a ticket. Just kind of a cute little picture, and just a way to kind of get our cops out there and engaged, but a really valuable service to us, and very, very, very good for the community. And I can say that the reserves that we have here at the police department that do an amazing job, and they're frankly inspiring to me, because someone that is willing, especially during the times, if you think about 75, so think about the last 30 plus years of policing, and you think about the ups and downs that have gone through the policing world, to have people that are so committed and so dedicated to the community that they come and they do it for free is absolutely amazing, and that certainly puts fuel in my tank, and I'm appreciative of that. Let's talk about some of our awards. We'll go over these a little bit quicker. If you want to read them in detail, they're in the book in the back. Our Officer of the Year is Officer Matt Ridgers. If you like the fact that we had the fewest amount of residential burglaries and commercial burglaries this year, he's probably a fairly good reason for that. He held a lot of investigations during the year where he closed burglary cases and recovered lots of property. Reserve Officer Chris Young, we just talked about our reserves. Well, Chris has over 40 years of service with the Sheriff's Office in the town of Danville. Just absolutely amazing. Ernie Kern. Ernie Kern Award is an award that we give out for excellence when it comes to youth services. And we realize that our kids in our community are very, very important to us, and the connection that we share with them should be one of the most important connections that we have, because they are the future. And with the transition of going back to in-person schooling, Alma did a very good job of working, coordinating with school and staff and the students to make sure that they were welcome. VIP of the year was Kathy McKinley, and she's in the lower right there. So Kathy is an amazing woman. Again, she's one that donates all of her time. She's actually here today to help support our Citizens Academy, but she does vacation house checks. She does patrols. You'll see her out in your neighborhood, and she is one of those that not only does she do good and great on an individual basis, but she's one of those people that really does well at being the glue that kind of binds a lot of our staff together. In fact, on Fridays, she actually always bakes like some cookies and stuff, and just really, really good. So she's just an excellent person. And again, 2 of the 4 of those award recipients are people that donate and volunteer their time. So let's look at employees of the quarter. Employees of the quarter for the first quarter of 2021, Juliette Kelly, that is my assistant. She is my friend. Well, let me go back. So she is the person that actually helps me do what I can do. So she helps manage the budget. She gets everything done here at the police department. If it wasn't for Juliette, things just flat out don't get done. So for me, I can't appreciate her any more than I can any other person here, because she does such a phenomenal job. And so I owe her a great deal. And by way of that, I think the community owes her a great deal, because she does excellent behind the scenes work. Any special event you've ever had, she's the one that makes sure that everyone's getting fed, that all of the people are there and well taken care of so that the event goes on. Just does a phenomenal job. So again, being my assistant, I'm very happy that she was given that award for the first quarter of last year. Chris Stark is actually one of our detectives right now, but as a patrol officer, he stays very active and makes lots of arrests, very proactive, and works well with the community, and is doing a great job over at investigations. Matt Ridgers, I've already talked about him. He's our Officer of the Year as well. And then Steve Stapleton is one of our longtime employees here. So for those that don't know, and I do talk about it from time to time, but we are a contract with the Sheriff's Office to supply officers for Danville. Steve Stapleton is one of those officers. The minimum commitment is about 4 years. Many people go beyond that. Steve is a good example. He's close to about 10 years, and he's been an officer. He's been a detective here. Now he's a supervisor, and he is just an absolute wealth of knowledge. He knows the area very well, and he's able to help and assist those new deputies that come in and make sure that they hit the ground running. So very good employees, very happy to honor them in the way that we have, and very happy that we're all here to serve the community. All right. So let's, one more thing real quick. Again, if you want to look at those past quarterly updates, they are in the Chiefs page, and the link can be found in the description. I encourage you to go check those out and find out what your police department is doing to serve all of you. All right, let me see if there are any more comments in the section here. All right. I don't see any, so I do want to cover our final thought. Our final thought is pursuits. So we talked about it. We had 2 pursuits in the last week. I think we've had 7 total for this year. 7. All of last year, we had 4. So that's we've almost doubled last year's whole total, and we're only in April. So that's quite a bit. And so I think it bears at least explaining what it is, why it is that we pursue, and what do our officers consider when determining to initiate a pursuit, whether we continue a pursuit, and whether we terminate. And if you want, there's actually a full copy of our sheriff's pursuit policy online. The sheriff has posted all of their policies. There are some redactions on some of them, but for the most part, the policies are all online. You can view them. I actually put a link in the description to the sheriff's website that directs you right to our policy section. So if you want to download it, read it yourself. It is quite a long policy, and I'm not going to cover every detail of it, but I think it's important for all of you to know that we do take a thoughtful approach, and there are safeguards in place so that we can make sure that we manage them appropriately. In our Citizens Academy, and I know I talk about it a lot, we actually take our residents out to our driving course, and we have them drive what we call our high-speed course. And it's really not that high speed. You get maybe 55, 60 miles an hour. But the point is we're asking you as a student to drive this course and really understand how much you can be distracted, how much you're missing, right? You tend to, when you get into high stress situations, you'll focus in, and we want people to understand why it is that we train that way. And we train that way because it feeds right into our policy on how we continue and whether or not we should terminate a pursuit. And terminate just simply means stop pursuing. So if an officer notices some sort of violation or crime, they're going to take a tactical approach to try to talk to the person, to stop the person. So imagine if someone's speeding down the road, or if there's a stop sign violation. I don't want to say we've all been stopped, but certainly I've been stopped by the police before. Officers will turn on their lights. We as citizens should see those lights and pull over, right? That doesn't always happen. Sometimes they actually flee. Most of the times people just pull over. If someone maybe has just committed a crime, and an officer gets behind them and recognizes them as a suspect vehicle, then they have probable cause to stop the vehicle, and they're going to try to stop the vehicle as they're associated with that crime that's been reported. So those are the different ways that we might come across a typical traffic enforcement stop, and those are the most common ways that actually initiate or lead to a pursuit. So once the officer starts to put on their lights and their siren, if the driver attempts to use their vehicle to flee, then that is a pursuit. And our officers are taught to consider a lot of things, but essentially it is distilled down to a balance test. Is the need to capture this person worth the risk that we're putting the public through? And so that's why you'll see, and that's why I think this week, having two of them back to back is a good example that sometimes we'll continue the pursuit based on the crime type and the need to capture the person, and other times it's best to say it is too dangerous to pursue based on certain conditions, and then we will come up with another way to catch them. And so what are the things that our officers are considering? Officers are going to consider the time of day. They're going to consider the amount of vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic, the actual crime type. Are we chasing someone because it's a stop sign violation or because it's a carjacking suspect? Are we able to effectively communicate with others? How familiar is the officer with the area? And that's different, right? When we're in Danville, we might be very familiar, but if we travel outside, are we that familiar, right? And so there's a lot of things that an officer is going to consider, that a supervisor is going to consider when considering to continue or terminate a pursuit. Our pursuits are typically going to involve at least 2 units because, and if anyone's gone through the driving course at the range, you'll know that if you're driving the car, it's really hard to do much else other than safely drive the car. And frankly, if you're in a pursuit, we just want our officers to safely drive the car and consider what's going on. Having to talk on the radio can be troublesome. So that's why we want that second car there. They'll take over in communications. They'll manage all that. And then we also have the expectation that a supervisor at a minimum, is going to be monitoring the pursuit. And we also have an expectation that a manager such as myself or Lieutenant Ingracia is going to be monitoring that pursuit as well. And the idea is we want people involved in the pursuit and engaged. We want them acting appropriately and safely. We want them thinking about should they continue or terminate, but we also want supervisors who have a much broader view of what's going on, thinking should we or should we not terminate. And I'll give you an example. So we had a pursuit several years ago, came in from out of town, and we were listening to it on the radio. And when a pursuit's coming in from out of town, we'll typically get into position and post in an area that will discourage the person from coming into town. So maybe on a freeway off ramp, like we want to keep them going through. We don't want them coming into town. However, if they come into town, we want to make sure that we take care of our primary responsibility, which is all of you. We want to protect our public. And in this case, that pursuit was actually heading on Diablo Road, towards downtown at about 3:30 in the afternoon. Now, I don't know of anyone that wants a pursuit going through downtown at 3:30 in the afternoon. So I got on the radio and said, cancel that pursuit right now. It's done. and all the units backed off, canceled the pursuit. And the idea is what we're hoping is that the person will continue to drive, but maybe do it at a reduced speed, maybe take a little bit more into consideration their surroundings, and do it safely. So we do have an obligation. We do take care during these pursuits. We do have a very robust policy, but it's important to me that you all know that we do try to hold those accountable that do wrong and commit crimes here in town. But we also take your safety in consideration. We don't just chase cars till the wheels can fall off. We take a very thoughtful approach, but we are here to safeguard lives, rights, and property, and we're committed to all of you to do that. All right, let me see if we've got any more questions. No, looks like we're done. All right. Well, again, I apologize for some of the technical difficulties. We're kind of working on figuring out the bug or the demon in that, but I do want to invite all of you out. We're going to be at Coffee with the Cops, Starbucks, 398 Hartz Avenue, April 13th, 2022, from 9 to 10. So you can come out. We'll be out there, and we're going to try to hold more in the afternoon. The last one we had at the Yogurt Shack was actually really good. We had a cop car out there. We had little kids jumping in and out of the car. It was absolutely great. Dan actually asked a pretty good question, so I'm not gonna end it just yet. So I hope you didn't go off. But so Dan actually asked, do you have a helicopter available to assist in pursuits? So I personally don't, because I'm a lieutenant with the sheriff's office assigned here as a chief, but our sheriff has 2 helicopters. East Bay Regional Parks has helicopters. Alameda County has helicopters. CHP has helicopters and fixed wing, lots of stuff. So yes, we have a lot of those tools available to us. And when we do get in a pursuit, we do want that up, because what that'll allow us to do is that'll allow us to create more space and distance and follow that pursuit or that vehicle that we're trying to apprehend in a safer manner. And we do have, and you can find it in our policy sections as well, in the pursuit policy, we do have a technology called Star Chase, which is, it's actually pretty neat. When cops get behind a car that they either feel is going to flee or is already actively fleeing, they can actually launch a projectile on there that will stick to the back, and it'll provide us GPS updates everywhere that car is going. So there are some technology alternatives that we have to try to make pursuits safer. And we have those in the sheriff's office. We have them right here in Danville. We're actually going to outfit 3 cars, I think in about 3 or 4 weeks with them. So we've got them all over the county. Great question. So Lucas says Podver Road needs more patrol, especially in the evening hours. If you could help me, Lucas, and let me know for what. Is it for speeders? Is it for stop sign? Is it for trespassing, people hanging out where they shouldn't be? Let me know what you're seeing, and we'll make sure we get the right resources out there. And the reason I asked for the specifics is, if it's traffic, I know which type of officer and where to maybe send them. If it's people trespassing or doing something else, then we might do a little bit different. Okay. So Lucas is saying it's a super active street for thieves being so close to the freeway, and with the multifamily dwellings, lots of cars to hit within a close proximity. Lucas basically just described why we have more crime near the freeways, and that is it. You've got cars in close proximity to one another, so it's very easy to walk through. That was one of our thefts from vehicle, was a car that was parked kind of in that area near the freeway. And Lucas, you're right. It's very easy, and we know, we've talked about it before, that motivated, and I'll throw it up real quick, the motivated offender, the left side of that triangle, the crime triangle, is the hardest one to affect, right? It's hard to predict. The suitable target or victim, and then site management, those are the 2 that we can. So again, if you think about it, the target of the victim is not leaving stuff in plain sight. It is not having whatever it is that criminal or that thief is going to want to take or attack available. And that is our side for the victim not being a suitable victim or target. But the other is site management, and this is where I think, Lucas, we could probably have a longer conversation later. But in those areas, if we had good motion lights and cameras, and we cut our bushes down a little bit, trees up a little bit, so that we make use of natural surveillance, we'd probably be even more apt to catch people. And I'll say this, with the density that you get in an area where you're going to provide cars that are easier to break in, you also have more people that are naturally walking around. And so you and your neighbors, if you've got that area design right, in other words, bushes low, trees high, you're going to be able to see when people are doing wrong. And if you remember, if you were watching last week, we had a third pursuit, a pursuit down to Pleasanton where someone was breaking into a home. And that was actually just south of you in our Fountain Springs neighborhood. They were breaking into a home. One of the neighbors there, actually, is the person that saw it, gave us the description of the vehicle to look for, and then within seconds later, we saw the vehicle leaving that area, and that's what initiated that contact. And so we as the police, we can't be everywhere at all at once, so we really do rely on you. And Lucas, what I'll do is I'll make sure that we note that, and our investigators and our patrol teams will both note that, so that we can provide additional patrol. And then our VIPs, those volunteers I talk about, they'll make sure to drive the car through there more often as well. So that's, Lucas, that's a great observation, and you're absolutely right, and I appreciate that feedback. All right. Well, Nancy, I appreciate the gratitude. Let me say this, though. If you like these sessions, we do them every Wednesday night, 5 o'clock. If you like it, make sure you hit the little thumbs up button. Make sure you if you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe the page. Forward this, maybe post it on your site, get it out so we can continue to have engagement. As long as there are people showing up, we will continue to be here. And so we're appreciative of the platform, and we're appreciative of all of you. So thank you. And we are 10-10, which means we're off duty, but we're always 10-8 and in service to all of you. Have a good night, Danville. Bye-bye.